All right, I am calling the Plan Commission for July 6th meeting to order. Roll call, please.
President Jay Langfeld.
Here.
Trustee Kettleboard.
Here.
Commissioner Duquette. Here. Commissioner Case. Commissioner Johnson.
Here.
Commissioner Zander. And Trustee Gross.
All right, thank you. Let's stand for a pledge of allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. We're at public comment. This is an opportunity for anyone to address the Plan Commission on any issue. Please observe a time limit of 3 minutes while the Plan Commission encourages input from residents. It may not discuss or act on any issue that is not duly noticed on the agenda. Is there anybody in cyberspace that?
Yes, we did have, so Mike Slavny, our village planner, did have some words for us.
Okay.
Go ahead, Mike.
Good evening, everyone. I'd like to introduce my colleague Ben Rohr to you tonight. This will be my last regularly scheduled Plan Commission with the village, as I'll be mostly retiring at the end of July. And it's been a pleasure working with you all and getting to know you. And Ben will do a fine job for you.
Well, thank you, Mike. We appreciate working with you over all these years. It certainly has been extremely beneficial to have you with us for so many years that you knew the history and everything. So we're certainly going to miss you, but we welcome Ben, and he can start learning the village as well as you did.
Yes, and he's got more time to learn it better.
All righty. Anything else? Anybody else?
That's all that I have registered.
All right, general business. Approval of the minutes from the June 7th, 2021 Plan Commission meeting. Do I have a motion?
No motion.
All right, do I have a second?
Second.
All right, I have a motion and a second to approve the minutes of the June 7th meeting. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye. Aye. All opposed, same. Carries. Number 2, discussion and possible action regarding the parks and conservation signage policy. We have Mike here if you want to do a quick summary of it.
All right, yes, so in front of you is information kind of explaining what we're looking for here, what the Parks and Recreation Conservancy Department and or committees looking for. Put together more or less a template for all of our parks, open space and trail signage guidelines. So starting from the day that this is all approved, these would be the new signs that would be added to our open space as new open space comes in. And also existing current open space that we have here within the village. In 2018, we developed a new parks and open space plan. And within that plan, the 2019 to 2024 Parks and Open Space Plan, one of the things called for new signage updated throughout our parks and open space, but mainly throughout our trails to kind of showcase where all these trails go, how people enter them as they do enter through a number of different easements off non-owned village property, and looked for ways that we could update such signage to implement throughout our entire village. Over the last year, maybe the last few months, there's been village trustees really calling for us to adhere and kind of conform with a lot of our parks and or open space areas to kind of address more or less having one symbol or one sign, one use for our parks, open space, so that people understand exactly where they're going to be. What I have before you today is more or less those guidelines and set up for the signage. I worked with the committee to kind of come up with a lot of these plans and a lot of the signage that you see before you tonight. The biggest thing that we are hoping for, or the goal side of this, is develop a sign standard for land managed by the Village Parks Department. And also create a comprehensive signage system that enhances the user experience. So as we expand on a number of these trails, whether it be through dedication or purchase, as we kind of move forward, we look to use these signs to add to that open space. The last thing would be to establish a recognizable identity, brand, and graphic aesthetic for the parks and open space managed by our department. And then within this guidance is a number of ways that we would get there, and a number of ways that the signage and or the branding of the village would be set up throughout these areas. So there's a number of permitted sign characteristics about what we're looking for, which I think is right in here with what Plan Commission looks at with the village signage code. We try to meet all those regulations best we could. And lastly, just kind of talks about the number of signs that would be needed. And obviously the village has a lot of open space, has a lot of parks. And I think the biggest hurdle for all of this is probably going to be funding. But over the last year or so, we have received a number of people that either wanted to donate towards new signage or talked about having new signs put into different parks. So HM Zander is one. The families contacted us to say, hey, we'd like to see new signage within that area. Another one is the John I. Hillenbrand Glacial Valley Conservancy, which is a conservancy located off Bourbon Road, also part of the Ice Age Trail, that the family has called to donate to. So I could see us being able to have these guidelines kind of set up as another option for people in the future, knowing what our needs are. We're kind of being proactive in that regard to know what we need. And hopefully, as things go on, we're able to get new signage throughout all of our existing areas. Any questions?
Well, I don't have a question, just some statements. One, I think this is done very well, but if you remember the board and this commission says that this policy should cover the whole village, remember? And the two main people who voiced that are not here tonight, but they want signs to be similar for like Village Hall, library, you know, telling people how to get to this, you know, waitlist signs for all different village-wide. So you guys are way ahead. And I think what we have to do as a commission, since we were given that task, we have to probably build on this to add to it, that it becomes village-wide for everything, not just parks and conservation. So I don't want to necessarily take action tonight on this, even though I think this is fine, but we have to incorporate the other half of this, because that was pretty much a direct message that we want these signs to be similar to what we're gonna do for the rest of the village. So I just wanted to point that out, that I'm not hesitant in doing this. I think it's very nicely done. And I don't think it'll take us too much to put in the village, but we haven't started. That hasn't been placed on the agenda. I will get it on the agenda, but I know Randy and Bill were real big on that they wanted it expanded to help not just parks and conservation. Is that your understanding too, Bill?
Yeah, and I think that the important part of getting this on the agenda now is to get us to start on
Yeah.
this, and so there's some direction here. In general, with the color theme, how these signs are gonna be built. I know there are some questions in regards to material and how it will be switched out if things change. And so I think this goes a long way to answering those questions, and then what we can do is take the specs and dimensions and translate it directly over to things like community facilities, Main Street signs, whatever we can label and whatever we can brand.
Yeah, because I would even like to see the pool have one.
Yeah, I think I have.
You know what I mean? So I agree, Phil. I think this is a great start, you know, for us to add to it. I don't think we need to change too much, but add to it, we'll have that discussion, but I will place that on, the next agenda. So, we get started on our, yeah, because you're way ahead of us again. Okay, Judy?
So I get confused when I go hiking on the hill sometimes, because there's some signs this and some signs that. Once we do this, will they all be together? Will we be on the like one sign?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's the plan. That's, you know, kind of where we're at. We've had a kind of a smorgasbord of different signage that we've either put together on our own, that's been up there for, you know, years, or things we've tried to add with little emblems without any village kind of identification on them. So the plan would be to go more towards, you know, all of this, once people to get there. And especially, we've received a lot of complaints about actually the Ice Age area, you know,
Right,
people are struggling with different, you know, ways to go there. So trying to work with them as well on the branding aspect of it along our own trails, but also getting, you know, the mountain biking is another area we've received a number of concerns just about like, where do we go? Is this private property or public? I think this would give us a better understanding.
Two other things.
Yeah, go ahead.
And then the other thing is that I've been asked about for signage, like if we can do like, not a kiosk, but you know, like when you go to a mall and you see like if we could do it somewhere like in Xander Park or somewhere down there, that lists actually our businesses in town or something, or somewhere in town, can we do some kind of sign that will list our businesses, but then we charge our businesses each year to put their name on it.
That would be something we would talk about. That's outside
So
the
that's
park.
not,
No,
that's
I
not
wouldn't.
signage?
Well, it's signage, but it's not park,
Okay,
he's
okay.
dealing with parks and rec
Okay. and then-
signage. You're right, we have signage that this committee has been tasked with,
Okay,
and we haven't started that. That would be one of the discussion points.
okay.
So what's your other one on that?
And the only other thing is, I'm not a fan of the vertical, but I'll go with it. I like the horizontal better.
So,
That's it.
yeah, and just to touch on that a little bit, the vertical decision was mainly because of a number of the easements that we have are very narrow areas
Oh,
through there. So
okay.
I thought this was something too that would stick out, something that was different, not necessarily like every other, you know, park or conservancy that you go to. And it allowed us to put the trail map on there,
Oh.
so you could show people, you know, this is where you are, and this is, you know, depending on where you want to go. But
No, good idea. Okay, cool with it.
Or Todd?
I personally liked it. I'm not overly fond of the orange, but I don't see what you guys see, so that's fine. But the material that they're made out of, I noticed some of them were out of the carved foam.
yeah,
Is that only the large ones, or is that the small ones, the medium ones, or all of them, or?
all of the actual signs, so the identifying signs are all the urethane, polyurethane. Or density, I'm sorry, high density urethane, so the sign foam, HDU is the spec that they use for them. That was the same spec we received before, for all the signage as well. The actual, small nameplates, or the mile marker signs, those are actually made out of aluminum.
So,
Was the intent from the board is to include this whole collection of wayfinding signs, like you know, the green ones that we,
I
Main
think,
Street and P, et cetera.
I think with the board, and members of this plan commission one is, we don't want different signage for parks and recreation, different for public utilities, different for way. You know what I mean? We want some uniformity throughout the village on any sign that we're responsible for. So I think everything's on the table. I'm not necessarily saying we're gonna replace the flag type signs we already have. I mean, that's what we need to discuss. But everything's on the table that's public, that's the message I received.
Yeah, and the way I see this is exactly how it was written in the memorandum, is that we're not going to actively seek to replace signs because some of them are rather new. It's so that we have a policy in place, so that when it comes time to replace them, we have a direction to go.
Right, and that policy needs to include everything.
One of the more is the traffic engineer, you know, when we talk about traffic wayfinding type signs, you know, there's specific colors and other things that, you know, we need to be aware of, and keep in mind if those aren't part of this kind of raw package. So
Okay.
it's like telling you, you know, I get to Glacier Creek Middle School. Maybe there's some other things that we can include in that, if it's included in those kind of signs. It's just like the identifying signs when they're at the location. That's a little different than the wayfinding signs.
Right, I think everything's on the table, and I think the idea, obviously, we're not gonna break state statute, we'll have to follow that, but I think the intent is try to get some, you know, to get them alike as much as possible throughout the village.
And to reduce the amount of signs, so that's,
Right.
you know.
Yeah.
That's one thing that you can benefit from this is having the wayfinding signs that meet state statute, but then you're able to reduce their signs potentially.
So I will start that discussion with the plan commission in August. But I think this is a good report, and I think the material and stuff, that can all be talked about later on. Everybody good with that?
Yeah.
So I certainly thank you, Mike, for doing your committee again, did an outstanding job. Who put this report together?
I did.
Very nice, very good.
Thanks.
We might just go with it.
Well, I mean, it's not all inclusive either, like you said, there's, I think over the years there'll be changes or additions or subtractions to it. But
Right.
I think at least someone comes in or whatever happens, let's say, no, this is why we use it and what we use it for.
But we at least have a document, and that's what's important. Yes, it's a living document, it's going to change, but the bottom line is we have something to start with that we can all agree on the direction. Sometime in the future, they may change the direction, but that's okay.
What are, I mean, you have a list of signs, just existing parks, and kind of, maybe what order you think we should put them in, what about like the new subdivision?
Yeah.
JP, et cetera, like, what are the next signs that are gonna need to be made that we're gonna have to have?
So, you know, I listed all the signs there of what were needed. Those weren't necessarily, you know, the order of which they'd be replaced or put in. So honestly, I didn't go through that part of it yet, like how many and what's next or what part of the year. I think that's the next step as we get some signage. Because there may be some redundancy that we don't need as well. But I think, you know, we have the new development, Scenic Valley, that'll be coming in. So as we plan for those parks and open space, we can plan for this signage to be part of that. So it can be used, parkland dedication money can pay for that sign. Same with, you know, Creeks Crossing as that comes in, same with other developments. But, you know, then the bear parks and all those have to be discussed and how we want it. What was most important to the group or to the village.
So your question is, what's the time, basically the timeline that we gotta get this done? Yeah, I think we have the fall and probably into the winter. I think spring would be, right? I mean, I don't think Scenic Valley is gonna be there this year, so that to me would be the next one that would be getting new signage.
Right, right. The only thing I pull back on that for timeframe is there are people that want to donate towards this, and they've had the money and wanted to do it now for over a year, because it's August of last year when they brought it forward the first time. So just so we don't lose that, you know, but knowing that we're moving forward, I think we'll be happy to do that.
Is there anything affected with the baseball field renaming? That's dedication, is there?
No, that's
That's
going
on
on.
the scoreboard.
Yeah,
Some of these parks do show up in the capital improvement plan, in the near future, not next year. But in Melody Acres Park, Westview was on there.
yeah, but I'm confident we can have this done by the end of the year.
Correct.
So I don't think we need to worry too much about if it happens in November or January. You know, I think we're safe. All right, anything else? All right, we'll go to number 3. Discussion and possible approval of the floor plan for the Learning Center at 1805 Bourbon Road.
All right, so, pull up the floor plan here quickly. There is an updated summary that was provided to you that was submitted late Friday by Araceli Martinez. She will be a partner in this. I believe she got on the phone with us. What they are doing here is proposing a daycare for the space on the lower level of 1805 Bourbon Road. Remember, the property owner, Mike Andres, came in for a conditional use permit. At that time, and part of the conditional use, a condition of the conditional use permit was that when they do decide on who the tenant will be for the downstairs, for that floor plan to come in approved, to ensure that there's a bed, the parking, and that the site design was proper. So just kind of an orientation here, because I know that the map is a little bit confusing. But I believe the north arrow here is the wrong way. This here is the back of the lot, so this is where the parking and the access will be. This here is the front, the green space is the front of the lot, which is south. And there will, this is all storage, so the green space on the south side here is not utilized for usage. All this space from the hallway, within the hallway and the screen space through these doors and to this door is all shared space. With this room here having stairs going up and out of the building as an escape. My understanding is they intend to use a key fob system for which the upstairs tenants will not have access to the downstairs and vice versa. Only one with access all throughout the building will be the property owner. Per the applicant's detailed summary, they intend to operate from 6 AM to 5:30 PM Monday through Friday and all year round. They estimate to have up to 30 children with approximately 6 staff, which meets the village's ordinance requirements for parking spaces. They have 11 on that side. Ms. Martinez, is there anything that you want to add? You can go ahead and unmute yourself. Well, I think we could just start the discussion and then come back.
I guess my comment would be, if you read, I'm not sure why we have it, but I would certainly want to remove is the requirement of 1 parking spot per 5 children. None of these kids can drive, so I'm not really sure why we have that requirement. And I think it's just one of those things that hurt the growth of a business. She may start with 30, but because of the parking spots, that's the limit of it. If she stays with 6 staff, so I would just eliminate the parking requirement for children and keep it for staff. And I would add that there's a safe way to unload and load children. That's all I think that daycare should be. I'm not sure why or the history behind that number. I don't know if it's state licensing requires it, then we can't do it, but from a village perspective, I don't see a reason why we have 1 parking spot per 5 kids.
Imagine it has to do with drop off as well as, people coming, parents coming for meetings or other events, is you gotta have a place for them to park. If all parking spots are dedicated for staff only, then where do the
Well,
parents?
I can assure you at, there are a lot of communities that have daycares in the downtown that don't have parking. They can park on the street, but there's still 11 parking spots. And I think there's still parking there, but a parent might visit, once or twice a month? I mean, I guess to have a requirement of having a parking spot for 5 children that don't drive, and there's really, besides pickup and drop off, probably limited time that there's a reason for parents to park a long time for anything. I just think, again, it's one of those things to me, that's red tape that slows down the growth of a business. Because right now, with a staff of 6 and 30 kids, there's no expansion there. She's already, before she even opens up the door, she's tapped out on her business plan. And I think that's not what we should be doing. And there's plenty of parking on street in that area, so I just feel that there needs to be a safe way for kids to get into the building and into the car. And if you see it in all the schools around here, they've all set up plans with that. You look at St. Francis, they're all along the curve, Glacier Creek, the same way. You know, that would be the only change I would like to see on this conditional use. It's the way that I'd like us to really at some point, take a hard look at that ordinance and try to come up with the reason behind it. Okay, Judy?
I agree with that. I noticed that also. I would eliminate that also. But then I was looking on here, it is approved by the state or it isn't been that?
It is not approved by the
Okay.
state at
So
this
that
time,
would
yes,
only
and
have
they
to
need,
be
you need
a-
approval of the site plan before they can submit that to the state. But I think there's a couple of technicals here that we have to sort out here. Maybe Mike, you can help me on this, but in regards to removing the requirement, because it's an ordinance requirement currently, I'm not sure if we can remove it by conditional use permit, or whether it would need to be by a variance or a change of the code.
But isn't that what a conditional use permit is? We're
Not
changing what is supposed to happen?
No, not necessarily.
Okay.
I'd be happy to weigh in. So the conditional use process is used to add conditions. For example, if someone was short on parking spaces, you could require them to come back in a year and just make sure there's no problem with the parking they've been providing. But to waive a requirement, the code provides 3 methods. One would be to change the code. One would be to do a plan development, which is the typical way to do it and allows you to be very site specific. And the third is with a variance, but it's very hard to get a variance in Wisconsin. I can tell you where the parking requirements, all of them came from in the ordinance. There's a nationwide organization called the Institute of Transportation Engineers, and they do trip generation and parking studies. And I remember specifically for daycares, I had the same question about, like nobody's there for any length of time. But they found that on average at the very peak hours of drop off in the morning, which tend to be the least variable, the tightest time frame, they needed 1 parking space for drop off on site for every 5 students that were attending. And I think the requirement for on-site parking in general is so in a part of the village that's very car oriented, we don't kind of overload the on-street parking. If you do wish to grant flexibility for this through a plan development, the one recommended change I would have is that a sidewalk be provided along this part of Bourbon Road. We don't want parents with kids walking in that street, I don't think, especially in the afternoon when people are driving to the west facing the sun. And I know Bourbon Road is used as a shortcut sometimes to get to KP. Anyway, a sidewalk along the frontage of the site we could require, and we could require a sidewalk with crosswalks across the parking lot from that street sidewalk, some clear path to the front of the building. And typically where it would come is on one side or the other of parking site 18, where you already have the striped areas. So you would, for example, just extend those stripes all the way across the parking lot to get to that sidewalk. I'm not sure that there's room and grade for a sidewalk, but typically that would be a requirement if you wanted to eliminate some of the required on-street parking. So in other words, what I'm saying is, we use the best data available to come up with the parking requirements. And in this instance, we've got what was kind of designed as an office building, and the density of parking is higher for daycares based on those practices. So what I would recommend is, let's see, if the intent is to waive the cap, maybe try a couple months worth of full attendance and see if there are adequate on-site parking spaces, and then bring it back to consider whether granting PUD flexibility to allow the expansion without additional parking spaces is merited. I think we have time to kind of tiptoe into this issue without making a final decision. I think we can see what the data actually is with the use of part of the space.
All right, thanks. There is a sidewalk in front, but the daycare, if I'm looking at this correctly, they're loading and unloading in the back. And he's now, if you look at the new design of the building, it looks like you can drive all the way around the building, so cars would all come in or do they have to come in on one side then back out?
Come in and back out on one side only,
Yeah, okay,
no,
okay.
so.
There is
It would be
a
on
there is
the-
a sidewalk on the road, is he talking?
Yeah.
There is a sidewalk there, and there is a crosswalk there already also, there's a crosswalk inside.
I think the only issue with this site is the access. I mean, unless they come through the main portion of the building, but the daycare's access is through the back.
Right.
I'm not in favor of bringing it back, for the fact that that's what ticks off people, is when they have to come back and come back and come back, so I'm not gonna vote for that.
Here's what we can do. We can, since we're limited that we can't do anything tonight on this. We'll pass it as is so they can start their business. And they, again, a PUD just solves this. I want us to be more friendly as a village and as a whole. So I'd rather look at changing the ordinance so it covers all daycares that come into the village. Because there's a great demand for childcare right now, and we should be doing whatever we can. And then we can have that discussion. So I'd rather, because I'm with Judy, I don't want people to just keep coming back and back. We'll pass it like this, and if we decide to change the ordinance, then they're covered that way. And I think that's the safest way, because Bill and I are making a list of ordinances that we continue to have difficulty or do variances with, that we might as well just change the ordinance. People don't have to do that.
Jay, I would agree. If you do see a problem, better to make the ordinance changed and solve the problem for everyone than create a process for everyone.
I think that's what we'll do. So, are there any other concerns? What has been proposed? Otherwise, I'd like to see a motion for approval.
I'll make that motion.
Do I have a second?
I'll second that.
I have a motion and a second to approve the floor plan for the daycare learning center at 1805 Bergen Road. Any other discussion on that?
Just,
Bill?
I did see that she's unmuted now. I don't know if you wanna hear from her or not.
Sure. She wants to. Go ahead.
Must not be hearing us. Well, is anybody here to represent the Safari Bilingual Learning Center?
Hello,
Oh,
Can you
hear
guys
us?
hear me?
Yep, we can hear you.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
Just identify
Sorry,
yourself.
I'm having difficulties with the whole phone thing. I apologize. Yes, I'm Araceli. I am going to be partnering with Yare Moreno. I am present.
Hey, is there anything that you would like to add or let the planning commission know before they vote on this?
I don't have anything right now other than thank you for considering the whole parking spot situation. But I also know that the state licensor will come and they will also review the parking spot. And from there, they will also make sure that there's enough parking stalls for the number of students or children that they do approve for the daycare.
Okay, thank you very much. So,
Thank you.
Thank you.
just, I know we're not deciding the parking thing here, but if, I thought, the previous version was there another driveway that went all the way around?
I thought that's what their original plan was.
Right, so without that, looking at this, I mean, there's no place for a vehicle to turn around here, so the only place drop-offs can be made is they have to pull in the parking spots, there's no place for them to turn around otherwise. And so I think you would need to have some empty parking spots just to serve that function. Okay, so-
Well, don't get me wrong, that was my first comment. I wouldn't make them parking, I would make them an area to drop off and safely pick up. Right? That's what
It's basically gonna be in a parking spot one way or the other, based on this cycle, there's not really another
right.
option.
All right, any other discussion? All in favor, say aye. Aye. All opposed, same. Do I have a motion for adjournment?
So,
Do I have a second?
I'll second.
All right, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same. Meeting adjourned. Thank you for coming.
wow, that's.
Thank you,
a lot of
everyone.
those.
Yeah.
That.
Yeah.
Well, basically.